She stood on the auction block with nothing left to sell but her breath, and he bought her for reasons even death couldn't explain. The rain had not stopped for 3 days in London, and the streets of Whitechapel smelled of rot and desperation. Inside the dim warehouse on Fowler Street, beneath gas lamps that flickered like dying stars, 73 souls stood in silent terror, waiting to be sold. Among them was Eleanor Ashford, 22 years old, hollow-eyed and shivering in a threadbare dress that had once been cream-colored. She had been a lady's maid in a respectable house until the mistress died and the estate crumbled. No references, no family, no coin. The workhouse had broken her spirit in 6 months, and when the men came offering employment opportunities abroad, she had been too weak to resist. Now she stood on a wooden platform, barefoot, her wrists bound with coarse rope that had rubbed her skin raw. Around her, merchants and factory owners circled like vultures, assessing teeth, checking hands for calluses, measuring worth in labor and years. "Lot 47, the auctioneer barked. "Female, age 22, literate, experienced in domestic service. Bidding starts at £5. Eleanor closed her eyes. She prayed for death. She prayed for mercy. She prayed for anything but the leering man in the front row who had already purchased 3 girls younger than her. £5, a voice called. 6, another countered. 7. The bids climbed slowly, mechanically. Eleanor felt her soul detaching from her body, floating somewhere above the warehouse, watching a girl named Eleanor being sold like livestock. Then the room grew cold. Not the damp chill of October rain, but something else. Something that made the gas lamps flicker in unison and the auctioneer's voice catch mid-sentence. £50. Every head turned. In the back of the warehouse stood a man Eleanor had not seen enter. Tall, perhaps 6 feet, dressed in a black wool coat with a silver-handled cane. His face was pale as marble, framed by dark hair that fell just past his collar. But it was his eyes that silenced the room. Gray as winter fog, ancient as cathedrals, holding a sadness that seemed older than the city itself. £50, he repeated, his voice low and precise, carrying an accent Eleanor couldn't place. European, perhaps. Old world. The auctioneer stammered. "Sir, that's more than generous, but perhaps you'd like to inspect—" "I said £50. The stranger's gaze never left Eleanor. "In gold. Now." He stepped forward, and the crowd parted instinctively. Men who had been shouting bids moments ago now pressed against the walls, suddenly afraid of nothing they could name. The stranger placed a leather purse on the auctioneer's podium. Gold coins spilled across the wood, gleaming impossibly bright in the dim light. "Cut her bindings," the stranger said. "Give her a coat, and if any man in this room follows us, I will remember his face." It was not a threat. It was a promise spoken with the weight of centuries. The auctioneer's hands shook as he cut Eleanor's ropes. Someone thrust a wool coat around her shoulders, and then the stranger was there, offering his gloved hand. "Can you walk?" he asked quietly. Eleanor stared at him. Up close, she could see the perfection of his features, too perfect, too symmetrical, like a statue given breath. And beneath the compassion in his eyes, something else flickered. Hunger, restraint, ancient guilt. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Someone who understands what it means to be sold," he said. "Come, before they remember they're afraid." He led her through the warehouse, through the rain-soaked streets, through alleys where gaslight couldn't reach. Eleanor's bare feet stumbled on cobblestones, but his hand remained steady at her elbow, cold even through his glove, but somehow grounding. They stopped before a carriage of black lacquer and brass, pulled by horses so dark they seemed cut from midnight itself. The stranger opened the door. "I won't hurt you," he said. "You have my word, Eleanor Ashford." She froze. "How do you know my name?" "I make it my business to know the names of those about to be erased." He gestured to the carriage. "You may enter freely. Or you may return to that warehouse and wait for death to claim you in some factory or brothel. The choice is yours. It will always be yours. Eleanor looked back at the warehouse. Eleanor looked back at the golden light spilling from its doors where 72 other souls still waited to be purchased. She thought of the workhouse, the cold, the hunger, the way hope had slowly bled from her heart until only ash remained. She looked at the stranger's outstretched hand, and she chose. Subscribe if you believe freedom is worth the price of the unknown. The carriage rolled through London's sleeping streets, wheels hissing on wet stone. Inside, Eleanor sat across from her unlikely savior, wrapped in his coat that smelled of old books and something sweeter, like roses preserved in winter frost. He had not spoken since they departed. His gray eyes remained fixed on the window, watching the city pass like a man saying goodbye to something he once loved. "What's your name?" Eleanor finally asked, her voice hoarse from disuse. "I have many names," he said, still not looking at her. "But you may call me Lucian." Lucian. She tested the name. It felt foreign on her tongue, like a word from a language she'd forgotten. "Why did you buy me?" Now he turned, and the weight of his gaze made her chest tighten. "Because I have lived 247 years, Miss Ashford, and I have learned that the only way to atone for the souls I failed to save is to save the ones I can." The words hung in the air between them, impossible and true. 200. Eleanor's hands clutched the coat tighter. "You're mad." Perhaps a ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Or perhaps I am something older than madness. Something that remembers when London was marshland and prayer. Something that has watched empires rise and fall and learned that human life is the only treasure that cannot be replaced." The carriage turned onto a street Eleanor didn't recognize. Wide and tree-lined, the homes set back behind iron gates and manicured gardens. This was Belgravia, where merchants and nobles lived behind brick walls and pretense. They stopped before a townhouse of gray stone, its windows dark except for one, a single light burning in an upper room like a lighthouse for lost things. Lucian helped her down, his touch cold even through her thin dress. A servant appeared at the door, an elderly woman with kind eyes and silver hair bound in a tight bun. "Mrs. Blackwell," Lucian said, "this is Miss Eleanor Ashford. She will be staying with us. Please prepare the blue room, draw a bath, and find her appropriate clothing. She is a guest, not a servant. Treat her accordingly." Mrs. Blackwell curtsied. "Of course, sir. Welcome, miss. Come, let's get you warm." Eleanor followed the housekeeper through halls lined with oil paintings and Persian rugs, up a sweeping staircase to a bedroom that stole her breath. The walls were papered in silk, the color of deep water. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, dressed in velvet and lace. Candles burned in crystal holders, casting warm light across polished furniture. "Is this real?" Eleanor whispered. "As real as you need it to be, dear," Mrs. Blackwell said gently. "Come, the bath is ready." Eleanor soaked in hot water for the first time in 7 months, washing away the workhouse grime, the auction house shame, the accumulated grief of losing everything. Mrs. Blackwell brought her a nightgown of white linen and a robe of midnight blue silk. When Eleanor finally emerged, wrapped in impossible softness, she found Lucian waiting in the hallway outside her room. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "I know. I have no way to repay you. I ask for no payment." He stepped closer, and she noticed how still he stood. No rise and fall of breath, no unconscious shifting of weight, like a painting pretending to be a man. "But I will ask something of you, Eleanor. A request, not a demand." "What?" "Let me give you back your life." His voice dropped to something raw. "Let me prove that not all who steal breath are monsters, that some of us remember what it was to be human and fragile and worth saving." Eleanor studied his face in the candlelight, the perfection of his features, the ancient sorrow in his eyes. The way he held himself at a careful distance, as if afraid his very presence might break her. "What are you?" she asked. Lucian was silent for a long moment. Then he smiled, a sad, beautiful thing that made him look both ageless and achingly young. "I am what happens when mercy refuses to die," he said. "And you, Eleanor Ashford, are what happens when someone finally answers the prayer I stopped believing anyone could hear." He bowed slightly and turned to leave. "Wait," Eleanor called. "Why me? Of all those people in that warehouse, why did you choose me?" Lucian paused in the doorway, his back to her. "Because when I looked at you," he said quietly, "I saw someone who had not yet forgotten how to hope. And I have been searching 2 centuries for someone who still remembers what hope looks like." He disappeared into the shadows, leaving Eleanor alone in her borrowed room, wrapped in silk and questions, wondering what kind of savior buys freedom with gold and asks for nothing but the chance to remember his own humanity. 3 weeks passed like a dream Eleanor kept trying to wake from. The days followed a gentle rhythm. Breakfast in the morning room overlooking the garden, afternoons in the library where Lucian had collected more books than Eleanor had seen in her lifetime, evenings by the fire where they spoke of poetry and philosophy and everything except what he truly was. He never ate in her presence, never slept. She heard him moving through the house at night, footsteps soft as prayer in the halls above her room. Sometimes she would wake at 3 in the morning and find fresh flowers on her nightstand, roses so dark they were nearly black, smelling of winter and eternity. Mrs. Blackwell was kind but close-lipped. The other servants, a young maid named Iris and a groundskeeper who rarely came inside, treated Eleanor with cautious respect, as if she were made of glass that might shatter at any moment. "You're the first in 50 years, Iris whispered one morning while helping Eleanor dress. "The first what?" The maid's eyes widened. "Nothing, miss. Forgive me." And she would say nothing more. Eleanor's body healed. The bruises faded. Her hands lost their workhouse calluses. Color returned to her cheeks. She ate until satisfied, slept without nightmares, wore dresses of silk and wool that fit her perfectly, though she never saw a seamstress arrive. But her mind refused to quiet. She began watching Lucian more carefully, the way he avoided mirrors, how he never opened curtains during daylight hours, the fact that his hands remained cold as marble no matter how long he stood by the fire, the way animals fell silent when he walked the garden at dusk. One evening, she found him in the library, standing before the window watching the sunset over London. His profile was gilded in dying light, beautiful and terrible, like an angel contemplating the fall. "How long have you been what you are?" Eleanor asked. Lucian didn't turn. "Since 1778. I was 28 years old. A physician in Vienna. I believed I could save everyone." His voice held the weight of ancient regret. "Then plague came, and I watched my patients die one by one, and I was powerless. When the thing that would make me immortal offered me eternity to continue healing, I said yes, without understanding the cost. What was the cost? Everything human." He finally looked at her. "I cannot taste food, cannot feel warmth, cannot age or die or fade into merciful nothing, and I must drink blood to survive, though I have not taken a human life in over a century." The words should have terrified her. Instead, Eleanor felt something else. Recognition. "You're a vampire." "Yes. And you saved me from the auction house because you reminded me why I chose this curse." Lucian crossed the room until he stood before her, close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes. "Every person I save, every life I preserve, is proof that something human survived the transformation, that I am not entirely the monster I became." Eleanor reached up slowly, giving him time to pull away. Her warm hand touched his cold cheek. He closed his eyes as if the contact pained him. "You're not a monster," she said. I have killed Eleanor. In my early years, before I learned control, I have drained life and left husks. I am damned. Then we're both damned, she whispered, because I was ready to die in that warehouse. I had given up, and you gave me back something I thought was lost. What? The belief that I might be worth saving. Lucian's eyes opened, and in them Eleanor saw 2 centuries of loneliness, of walking through endless nights, searching for some scrap of redemption. She saw the war between what he was and what he wished to be. I'm falling in love with you, she said, the words escaping before wisdom could stop them. And I don't care that you're cold, or immortal, or cursed, because you saw me as human when everyone else saw property. Eleanor. His voice broke. I cannot offer you a normal life. I don't want normal. Normal sold me on an auction block. She stepped closer. I want this. You. Whatever strange salvation this is. If I lose control, you won't. I could hurt you. You could have hurt me 100 times already. Eleanor took his cold hands in her warm ones. But instead, you brought me flowers. You gave me books. You taught me that someone who cannot die still remembers how to live. Lucian stared at their joined hands. Life and death intertwined, warmth bleeding into cold. Then, slowly, carefully, as if she might shatter, he pulled her close. His arms wrapped around her, and Eleanor felt his chest against her cheek. No heartbeat, no breath, only the solid permanence of something that had survived centuries. She tilted her face up, and he kissed her with the desperate tenderness of someone who had forgotten how to touch without breaking. When they finally separated, Lucian's eyes were bright with something that might have been tears if vampires could still weep. Stay with me, he whispered, for however long mortality allows. Let me love you as I once loved being human. Eleanor smiled. Yes. Outside, the sun finally died, and London settled into darkness. Inside, a girl who had been sold found freedom in the arms of something immortal, and a vampire who had forgotten how to live learned that love required no pulse, only the courage to try again. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these immortal confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The months that followed were stolen time, precious and fragile. Eleanor learned to live in the rhythm of darkness, sleeping through mornings, waking at dusk when Lucian emerged from whatever hidden room he spent the daylight hours. They would walk the garden at midnight, frost crunching beneath her feet while he moved silent as thought beside her. He taught her things no finishing school would consider. Philosophy from Vienna's coffee houses, medicine from his mortal years, the names of stars in languages long dead. She taught him what he'd forgotten, how to laugh without bitterness, how to touch without fear, how to exist in a moment without calculating its cost in years or decades or centuries. You make me feel young again, he told her one December night, snow falling soft around them in the garden. As if 200 years never happened. Eleanor turned in his arms, her breath misting in the cold while his remained absent. Good, because you brood like an old man. I am an old man. You're my old man. She kissed him, her warm lips against his cold mouth, the familiar shock of it never quite fading. And I wouldn't have you any other way. Lucian smiled, a real smile, unguarded and genuine. Eleanor had learned to treasure those rare moments when the ancient sadness lifted from his features and he looked almost human again. They returned to the house near midnight, tracking snow into the foyer. Mrs. Blackwell waited with worried eyes. Sir, she said quietly, there are men in the drawing room. They arrived an hour ago. They claim to be from the church. Lucian went very still, and Eleanor felt the temperature drop several degrees. What church? He asked, his voice carefully controlled. They didn't specify. They said only that they needed to speak with the master of the house about matters of eternal significance. Lucian's jaw tightened. Eleanor, go to your room, lock the door, do not open it for anyone but me. I'm not leaving you, please. He cupped her face in his cold hands. Trust me. These men are dangerous in ways you cannot imagine. Before Eleanor could argue, he was gone, moving with the inhuman speed she'd only glimpsed in moments of stress. She heard voices from the drawing room, low, tense, threatening. Eleanor did not go to her room. She crept to the drawing room door, pressing her ear against the wood. Inside, 3 male voices spoke with Lucian. We've been tracking you for 20 years, vampire, said a voice thick with Irish accent. From Vienna to Paris to London, always moving, always hiding, always pretending to be something you're not. I have harmed no one, Lucian replied, his tone level. I hunt animals. I help the forgotten. I have broken no laws, mortal or divine. You exist, a second voice spat. That is crime enough. You are an abomination, an affront to God. Then let God judge me, Lucian said, not zealots with silver bullets and holy water. We've watched you with the girl, the Irish voice continued. The one you bought from the auction, Eleanor Ashford. We know what you are to her, what she's become to you. Eleanor's blood ran cold. Leave her out of this, Lucian said, and for the first time, she heard something dangerous in his voice, the predator beneath the gentleman. She is innocent. She's been corrupted by hellspawn, the third voice said, younger, almost eager. She must be cleansed. The demon must be destroyed. It's for her own soul. If you touch her, Lucian said softly, I will show you what 2 centuries of restraint looks like when it finally breaks. Silence, then the sound of wood scraping, chairs pushing back. We'll return tomorrow, the Irish voice said. At noon, when you're weakest, and we'll finish what should have been done in Vienna 200 years ago. Say goodbye to your little pet, vampire. By tomorrow night, you'll both be ashes. Footsteps, the front door opening and closing. Eleanor burst into the drawing room. Lucian stood by the fireplace, his back to her, hands gripping the mantel so tightly the marble cracked beneath his fingers. Lucian, you need to leave. He didn't turn. Tonight, Mrs. Blackwell will give you money, references, everything you need to start over somewhere they'll never find you. I'm not leaving you. Eleanor, they will kill me, and they will call it holy work. I've accepted this for decades. I am damned, and perhaps I deserve whatever end they bring. But you still have a life, a chance. I won't let them take that. Eleanor walked around to face him. His eyes glowed faintly silver in the firelight, the only outward sign of the monster he kept chained inside. Do you remember what you asked me? She said. 3 months ago, in the library, you asked me to let you love me as you once loved being human. Yes. Then love me enough to fight. She grabbed his cold hands. Love me enough to run. Love me enough to survive. Because I didn't escape one death just to lose you to self-sacrifice. There's nowhere they won't follow. Then we go somewhere they can't reach. Europe, America. Somewhere far from London and silver bullets and men who believe murder is righteousness. Eleanor's voice shook. I'm not losing you, Lucian. Not to hunters. Not to guilt. Not to anything. Do you understand? Lucian stared at her, and slowly the silver glow in his eyes faded back to gray. You would leave everything for me, a monster? You're not a monster. You're the first person in my entire life who saw me as worth saving. She stepped closer. Now let me return the favor. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he pulled her close, burying his face in her hair, his cold body pressed against her warmth. I don't deserve you, he whispered. Probably not, Eleanor agreed. But you have me anyway. Now start packing. By dawn, they were gone. two shadows slipping into the grey London morning, leaving behind an empty house and hunters' bullets that would find nothing but dust and memories. The Scottish Highlands in February were beautiful and brutal. Snow covered the moors in endless white, broken only by dark stone and skeletal trees. The cottage Lucian had purchased a century ago stood alone on a cliff overlooking the North Sea, miles from the nearest village, reachable only by a narrow road that disappeared in winter storms. It was perfect. Eleanor adjusted to isolation slowly. The first weeks were novelty, reading by firelight, exploring snow-covered hills, learning to cook with limited supplies. But as winter deepened, the silence grew heavy. No neighbors, no society, no one but Lucian, the wind, and the constant roar of waves against rock. "Do you miss London?" Lucian asked one night, watching her stare out the window at the moonlit sea. "I miss people," Eleanor admitted. "Strangers in the street, the sound of carriages, proof that the world still exists beyond these walls." "I'm sorry, don't be." She turned to him. "I chose this. I'd choose it again." But Lucian saw what she tried to hide, the way cabin fever slowly eroded her spirits, how she grew quieter each week, more withdrawn. By March, she rarely left her bed before noon. By April, she stopped asking when they might return to civilization. She was dying by inches, killed not by hardship, but by loneliness and the terrible weight of empty time. One night in early May, Lucian woke her at midnight. "Get dressed." Warmly. "Why?" "Because I'm taking you somewhere." They walked the cliff path beneath a sky brilliant with stars. The North Sea crashed below, white foam phosphorescent in the darkness. After 20 minutes, they reached a clearing overlooking the water, and Eleanor gasped. Someone had planted wildflowers, hundreds of them, impossible colors blooming in the harsh highland climate. They surrounded a single stone bench carved with words in Latin. "What does it say?" Eleanor asked. "Here stands a monument to life," Lucian translated. "May all who rest here remember they were loved." "Did you make this?" 50 years ago, for a woman named Catherine." Lucian sat on the bench, staring at the flowers. "She was human, like you. And she loved me despite what I was. We had 12 years together before consumption took her. She died in my arms, asking me to remember that she chose me, freely, knowing all the costs." Eleanor sat beside him, her hand finding his cold one. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I see the same slow fading in you that I saw in her." Lucian's voice cracked. "Not from illness, but from isolation, from a life that's too small for your spirit. I saved you from the auction only to trap you in a different cage." "Lucian, let me finish." He turned to face her fully. "There is a choice I can offer. One I've offered only twice in 2 centuries, and both times I was refused because the cost is too high." Eleanor's heart began to race. "What choice?" "I can make you like me." The words hung in the cold air like a confession. "I can give you immortality, strength, freedom from age and sickness and death. We could travel the world, centuries together, never afraid of losing each other to time. But you would lose your humanity. Sunlight would burn you. Food would taste like ash. You would need blood to survive, and you could never go back. Once changed, eternity is forever." Lucian's gray eyes held hers. "You would become what the hunters call an abomination, what I call damned." Eleanor stared at the wildflowers swaying in the sea breeze. She thought of London, of the auction block, of dying slowly in a workhouse, forgotten and worthless. Then she thought of Lucian's cold hands, his ancient eyes, the way he'd given her freedom when no one else would. "If I say yes," she asked slowly, "would you regret it?" "Every day," Lucian admitted, "because I would have stolen your mortality, your chance at heaven, your natural end. And if I say no, then I'll take you back to London, give you enough money to live comfortably, watch you from a distance as you age and marry and have the human life you deserve." His voice broke. "And I'll plant flowers where you're buried and remember you loved me anyway." Eleanor stood, walking to the cliff's edge where land met empty air. Below, the North Sea roared its eternal song. Behind her, a vampire waited with a choice that would define both their eternities. She thought about time, how much she'd already lost, how little she might have left. She thought about love and whether it needed a heartbeat or just the courage to keep choosing the same person through endless nights. Finally, she turned back to Lucian. "I don't want to live without you," she said. "I don't want to grow old while you stay frozen. I don't want some future husband whose touch feels warm and empty compared to yours." She walked back to him, kneeling so their eyes were level. "I want eternity, Lucian, with you, damned or blessed or somewhere in between. Eleanor, I'm choosing this, freely, knowing the cost." She took his face in her hands. "Because you taught me something more important than humanity. You taught me I'm worth fighting for, and now I want to fight beside you, for centuries, for forever." Lucian closed his eyes, and a single tear traced down his marble cheek. Blood red, the only tears vampires could cry. "Are you certain?" he whispered. "Yes." "Then come with me." He stood, pulling her up. "If we're going to do this, I'll do it right. Not in violence or desperation, but with love, with choice, with everything you deserve." They returned to the cottage as dawn threatened the horizon. Lucian prepared the bedroom carefully. Candles, flowers, fresh linens. He made her tea and sat beside her, explaining what would happen, ensuring she understood that once begun, there was no reversal. "It will hurt," he said, "and when you wake you'll be different, stronger, colder, hungry in ways you've never known." "Will you be there?" Eleanor asked. "Every moment, I promise." She smiled. "Then I'm ready." Eleanor Ashford, who had been auctioned like property and saved by a monster, lay back in their bed and offered her throat to the vampire she loved. And Lucian, who had spent 2 centuries trying to remain human, finally chose to share his curse with someone who saw it as a gift. Outside, the sun rose over the highlands, but inside, a girl died and was reborn into darkness. And for the first time in 200 years, Lucian believed that perhaps damnation could be endured, as long as you had someone worth being damned beside. Comment eternal if you'd trade mortality for love that never ends. Eleanor opened her eyes to a world remade. Everything was sharper. The candlelight felt like noon sun, each flame a small star burning in her retinas. She heard Lucian's breathing in the next room, heard the whisper of air through lungs that moved by habit rather than need. She smelled the sea 3 miles away, salt and kelp and the blood of fish in the shallows. And beneath it all, a hunger. It started as a whisper in her veins, a hollow ache that had nothing to do with her stomach and everything to do with her new nature screaming for sustenance. She sat up too fast, the movement inhumanly quick, and found herself standing beside the bed with no memory of rising. Slowly, Lucian's voice came from the doorway. "Your body is still learning its own strength." Eleanor turned to him, and the world spun with impossible clarity. She could see every thread in his shirt, count the silver flecks in his eyes, track the way dust motes danced in the air between them. "I can hear everything," she whispered, and even her own voice sounded different, richer, deeper, holding overtones she'd never heard before. "Yes." Lucian crossed to her carefully, as if approaching something wild. "Your senses are enhanced 100-fold. It takes time to adjust. Weeks, perhaps months, before the world stops overwhelming you." Eleanor looked down at her hands. They appeared the same small fingers, same thin wrists. But when she flexed them, she felt the power coiled beneath the skin. She could crush stone if she wished, tear through steel, move faster than human eyes could track. "Is this what you feel all the time?" she asked. This is what I've felt for 200 years. Lucian touched her cheek gently. How do you feel? Eleanor considered. Her heart beat, slowly, only a few times per minute. Just enough to keep her animated. She felt cold, but not uncomfortably so. And beneath everything, that constant whisper of hunger growing louder with each passing moment. I'm thirsty, she admitted. I know. Lucian produced a crystal glass filled with dark liquid. Not human. Never human. I promise you that. This is from a deer I hunted last night. It's still fresh. Eleanor took the glass, and the smell hit her like a physical force. Her fangs extended without conscious thought, delicate and sharp, sliding from her gums. The hunger roared. She drank. The blood was warm and rich and more satisfying than any food she'd ever tasted. It filled the hollow ache in her veins, quieted the screaming need, made her feel whole in a way she hadn't since before the workhouse. When the glass was empty, she looked up at Lucian with blood-stained lips. Oh, God, she whispered. What have I become? Something beautiful, Lucian said, wiping the blood from her mouth with his thumb. Something strong. Something that will never again be sold or starved or forgotten. Eleanor stared at her reflection in the window glass. She looked the same dark hair, same thin face, but her eyes had changed. The brown had lightened to amber, flecked with silver. Predator's eyes, immortal eyes. I can't go back, she said. No. I'll never see sunlight again. No. I'll need to drink blood to survive. Yes. Eleanor turned to face him. Are you sorry you changed me? Lucian was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, sad and genuine, and full of 2 centuries of loneliness finally ended. Ask me again in 100 years, he said. When you've had time to understand what forever means, when you've watched the world change and humans die and civilizations crumble. Ask me then if I regret giving you immortality. But what do you think now? He pulled her close, his cold body against hers. 2 immortals wrapped in each other's arms while the last of night faded outside. Now? Lucian kissed her forehead. Now I think that for the first time since Vienna, I don't have to walk through eternity alone. And that is worth whatever damnation awaits us both. The next months were a crash course in vampire survival. Lucian taught her control, how to hunt without killing, how to move among humans without revealing her nature, how to exist in a world that would destroy her if it knew what she was. They hunted deer on the moors at midnight. Eleanor learned to move with inhuman speed, to drop from cliffs without injury, to hear a heartbeat from 100 yards away. She learned to feed without frenzy, to take only what she needed, to leave her prey alive and healing. We're not monsters, Lucian told her one night as they cleaned blood from their hands in a mountain stream. We're survivors. There's a difference. Eleanor looked at her reflection in the water, immortal, unchanging, no longer entirely human. The hunters wouldn't see it that way. No, they wouldn't. Lucian's expression darkened, which is why we'll keep moving. Every 10 years, perhaps 20. New cities, new names, always careful, always watching. For how long? Forever. He took her hand. That's what eternity means, Eleanor. No rest, no home, just each other and the endless road. Eleanor squeezed his cold fingers. Then we'd better start walking. They left Scotland that spring and didn't look back. Paris first, then Vienna, then Prague. Cities where they could disappear into crowds, where wealth bought privacy, where 2 cold strangers asking for rooms with shuttered windows raised no suspicions. Eleanor learned languages: French, German, Italian, Russian. She read everything: philosophy, science, poetry, history. Lucian taught her medicine and mathematics. She taught him to laugh again, to enjoy the small moments, to stop calculating every interaction in terms of decades and start living in the present. They attended operas in Milan and ballets in St. Petersburg. They walked through museums after hours, bribing guards with gold to let them see masterpieces by candlelight. They danced in empty ballrooms and made love in rented rooms, two immortals pretending they were still the humans they'd left behind. And through it all, Eleanor never regretted her choice. Venice, 1935. Eleanor stood on their private balcony overlooking the Grand Canal, watching moonlight silver the water. 50 years had passed since her transformation, and she'd learned that time lost meaning when you had infinity. Days blurred into weeks, years into decades, until only the big moments stood out. Their first hunt together, their first sunrise avoided, their first close call with exposure. She looked 22, exactly as she had the night Lucian changed her. He appeared 28, frozen at the age of his own transformation. To the world, they were siblings, or cousins, or business partners. Any lie that explained why they never aged, never ate in public, never appeared before dusk. "You're brooding again," Lucian said, joining her on the balcony. He wore evening clothes, impeccably tailored, his dark hair styled in the modern fashion. Even after half a century together, he still took her breath away. "I'm remembering," Eleanor corrected. "There's a difference." "Remembering what?" "The auction house. That night you bought me." She smiled. "I was so afraid. I thought death would have been kinder." "Would you change it?" Lucian asked quietly. "If you could go back, knowing what eternity would cost?" Eleanor turned to face him fully. "Never. Not for anything." She kissed him, and the familiar coldness of his lips against hers still sent electricity through her immortal nerves. "You gave me forever, Lucian. That's a gift, not a curse. Even when forever means hiding, running, never having children or growing old or any of the things humans take for granted." "I never wanted those things anyway," Eleanor said. "I wanted to be seen, to matter, to exist as more than property." She cupped his face in her hands. "You saw me. That's all I ever needed." They were preparing to leave for the opera when Mrs. Blackwell, who had chosen transformation 20 years ago and now served as their day guardian, rushed into their palazzo's grand hall. "Sir, madam," she said, her usual composure shattered. "There are hunters in Venice, at least 6 of them. They arrived yesterday asking questions about a vampire couple who've been seen throughout Europe. They have descriptions. They know your faces." The bottom dropped out of Eleanor's world. "The Irish hunter," Lucian said flatly. "Father O'Brien. He's still alive?" "Apparently so, and he's brought reinforcements, silver bullets, holy water, wooden stakes. They're searching every palazzo, every hotel, every rented room in the city." Lucian's face went hard. "Then we leave tonight, before they can organize a proper search." "They're watching the bridges," Mrs. Blackwell said. "And the trains. They knew you'd run." Eleanor grabbed Lucian's arm. "Then we fight." "No. Lucian, I won't risk you." His eyes blazed silver. "Not for pride, not for anything. We find another way out." But there was no other way. The hunters came at midnight, breaking down the palazzo's grand doors with blessed iron. Eleanor heard them before they entered. 6 heartbeats, 6 humans armed with faith and silver, convinced they were doing holy work. "Upstairs," Lucian hissed, pulling Eleanor toward their private chambers. "The sunroom. There's a secret passage." "We know about the passage, demon," a familiar Irish voice called from below. "We've been planning this for 50 years, every escape route, every bolt hole, every trick you've learned. It ends tonight." Eleanor and Lucian reached their bedroom just as the hunters gained the stairs. Lucian shoved a bookshelf aside, revealing a narrow passage behind the wall. "Go," he said. "I'll hold them off." "No." Eleanor planted her feet. "I'm not leaving you." "Eleanor, we survive together or not at all," she said fiercely. "That's the deal. Remember?" Lucian stared at her, and something shifted in his expression. The ancient caution fell away, replaced by grim determination. "Together, then," he said, and his fangs extended fully. Let's show them what 50 years of eternity has made us. They met the hunters at the top of the stairs. Father O'Brien looked older, 70 now, white-haired and weathered, but his eyes still burned with fanatic certainty. Behind him, 5 younger men carried crossbows loaded with wooden stakes and rifles filled with silver bullets. "Eleanor Ashford," O'Brien said, his voice shaking with age and rage. "Do you even remember being human? Or has the demon corrupted you so thoroughly you've forgotten what it means to have a soul?" "I remember being sold," Eleanor said coldly. "I remember being property. I remember praying for death and getting something better instead. You call damnation better? I call freedom better. Choice, love, a life that's mine and not dictated by men who see women as commodities." Eleanor's eyes flashed silver. "You want to kill us because we're monsters? Look in a mirror, Father. You're the one breaking into homes with weapons and scripture, murdering people who've harmed no one." "You're not people." "We were once," Lucian said quietly. "And we remember. That's what makes us more human than you'll ever be. We chose mercy when we could have chosen blood. Lies." "Then pull your triggers, Father," Lucian said. "Kill us both. Burn our bodies, scatter our ashes, and spend the rest of your days wondering if you murdered 2 innocents in the name of a God who commanded thou shalt not kill." O'Brien raised his crossbow, and Eleanor moved. She was faster than she'd been even a year ago. 50 years of immortality had honed her speed to impossible levels. She disarmed 2 hunters before they could react, her hands blurring. Lucian took 3 more, moving like smoke and violence. The last hunter fired. Silver exploded through Eleanor's shoulder, spinning her around. The pain was exquisite. Silver burned vampires from the inside out, poisoning blood and tissue. She fell to her knees, gasping. Lucian roared. The sound wasn't human. It was 2 centuries of restrained fury finally unleashed. He moved through the hunters like a wolf through sheep, disarming them, breaking weapons, throwing men through walls. But he didn't kill. Even in rage, even protecting what he loved, he held back. Within seconds, all 6 hunters lay groaning on the floor, battered but alive. Lucian stood over them, fangs bared, eyes blazing. "I could kill you," he said. "It would be easy. It would be justified. But I won't. Because unlike you, I remember what it means to value life." He pulled the silver bullet from Eleanor's shoulder, and she screamed, "Leave Venice, tonight. Never hunt us again. Or next time, I won't show mercy." Father O'Brien struggled to his feet, blood streaming from a broken nose. "This isn't over." "Yes," Eleanor said, standing with Lucian's support. "It is. Because we're not running anymore. We're tired of hiding, tired of being hunted by people who see fangs and forget the souls beneath. You want to kill us? Then you'll have to do it in front of witnesses, in public, where the world can judge whether we're the real monsters." They left the hunters in the shattered palazzo and disappeared into the Venetian night. By dawn, they were in Rome. By the next week, Barcelona, always moving, always free, never afraid, because Eleanor had learned something in 50 years of immortality. Freedom wasn't the absence of danger. It was the choice to live boldly despite it. Subscribe if you believe the monsters worth fearing are the ones who hunt love with scripture. New York City, 2025. Eleanor stood on the balcony of their Manhattan penthouse, watching the city's neon rivers flow 40 stories below. She wore a black dress and diamond earrings, her dark hair styled in the current fashion, looking exactly as she had in 1885. Behind her, Lucian adjusted his tie in the mirror, force of habit from mortal days, though no reflection showed. 140 years had passed since the auction house. The world had transformed beyond recognition. Electricity, automobiles, airplanes, computers, the internet. Humanity had built empires of glass and steel, connected continents with information traveling at light speed, achieved wonders that would have seemed like magic to their younger selves. And still, they remained the same, immortal, unchanging, forever frozen at 22 and 28. "Are you ready?" Lucian asked. Eleanor turned from the city, "As ready as I'll ever be." Tonight was different. Tonight, for the first time in their immortal lives, they weren't hiding. The venue was the Museum of Natural History, rented for a private gala benefiting medical research. 500 guests, millionaires, celebrities, politicians, artists. Lucian had donated $10 million under his current name, Adrian Sinclair. The donation came with an invitation to speak about his foundation's work funding blood disease research. It was a calculated risk, appearing in public, being photographed, accepting recognition. But Eleanor had convinced him it was time. "We've been shadows for a century and a half," she'd argued, "helping people from the darkness. But we could do so much more if we stopped hiding. Fund research, support causes, use our accumulated wealth to actually change things." "And when people notice we don't age," Lucian had asked, "we move, like we always do. But at least we'll have done something that matters, left a mark that says we were here, we cared, we chose to help." So here they stood, preparing to step into the light, metaphorically, of course. Sunset had come and gone 2 hours ago. The gala was everything Eleanor both loved and hated about the modern world. Beautiful people in designer clothes, champagne flowing like water, waiters carrying food neither she nor Lucian could taste. But the cause was real. The research would save lives. That made the pretense bearable. Lucian gave his speech at midnight. He stood at the podium in a perfect tuxedo, speaking about the importance of blood disease research with the authority of someone who'd spent 2 centuries studying medicine. He spoke of his personal connection to the cause, how he'd watched people die from blood disorders, how he believed science could solve what faith could not. Eleanor watched from the crowd, pride swelling in her chest. This was what immortality should be, not just survival, but purpose, using their endless time to leave the world better than they found it. After the speech, they mingled. Eleanor had learned the art of conversation over decades, how to seem warm without being memorable, how to deflect personal questions, how to exist in public while revealing nothing true. Mrs. Sinclair, a woman in red, approached, champagne in hand. "Your husband's speech was moving. How long have you two been married?" "Feels like forever," Eleanor said with a practiced smile. "You look so young. What's your secret?" "Good genes, and avoiding sunlight." Eleanor laughed as if it were a joke. "I'm terribly photosensitive, practically a vampire." The woman laughed too, never knowing how close to truth she stood. But then a man appeared at Eleanor's elbow, mid-60s, silver-haired, wearing an expensive suit and a priest's collar. Her immortal instincts screamed danger. "Mrs. Sinclair," he said, his Irish accent faint but unmistakable. "Father Michael O'Brien, wonderful event. Your husband's generosity is remarkable." Eleanor's blood went cold. O'Brien, the same family name as the hunter from Venice, from London, from 90 years of pursuit. "Thank you, Father," she managed. "I'm particularly interested in your foundation's work." His eyes, the same fanatical blue as his predecessors, studied her face. Blood diseases, fascinating focus, almost as if you have personal experience with the subject. "My husband is passionate about medical research." "And you? What's your passion, Mrs. Sinclair?" He leaned closer. "What drives someone who looks 25, but moves like she's seen centuries?" Eleanor forced herself to breathe, to maintain the facade. Fashion, mostly, and good lighting. Father O'Brien's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You know, I had a great-great-uncle, Father Patrick O'Brien. He spent 50 years hunting vampires across Europe, died in 1960, still convinced they were real. Family legend says he tracked a couple, a man and woman, eternally young, from London to Venice to Barcelona, lost them somewhere in the 1940s. "How interesting," Eleanor said flatly. "If you'll excuse me." He kept journals, O'Brien continued, pulling out a smartphone. Sketches of the vampires he hunted. I digitized them last year. Fascinating historical artifacts, really. He showed her the screen. Eleanor's heart stopped. The sketch was crude, pen and ink from 1935, but unmistakable. Her face, Lucian's face, rendered by someone who'd seen them in Venice 90 years ago. Remarkable resemblance, don't you think? O'Brien said softly. To you and your husband. Almost like you stepped out of history. Across the room, Lucian's head snapped up, sensing Eleanor's distress. He began moving toward them, cutting through the crowd with inhuman precision. You know what I think, Mrs. Sinclair? O'Brien's voice dropped to a whisper. I think my great-great-uncle was right. I think vampires are real. I think you're one of them. And I think it's time the world knew what walks among us. And what would you do with that knowledge, Father? Eleanor asked, her voice deadly quiet. Hunt us? Kill us? For the crime of existing while trying to help people? I'd expose you. Let humanity decide what to do with creatures that shouldn't exist. Lucian arrived, sliding between Eleanor and the priest with practiced ease. Father O'Brien, enjoying the event? Very much, Mr. Sinclair. O'Brien pocketed his phone. I was just telling your wife about my family history. Fascinating stuff. Perhaps we could discuss it further, over lunch, tomorrow, say noon. The threat was explicit. Noon, when they'd be helpless. I'm afraid we're leaving the city tomorrow, Lucian said smoothly. Urgent business overseas. Perhaps another time. Oh, I think we'll be seeing each other again very soon, O'Brien said. After all, I know where you live, where you work, every property you own under every name you've used in the last 20 years. He smiled. Technology is wonderful, isn't it? Makes it so much easier to track immortals who leave paper trails. He walked away, leaving Eleanor and Lucian frozen among the champagne and laughter. We need to leave, Eleanor whispered. Tonight. Agreed. They made their excuses, left the gala, and returned to the penthouse. Within an hour, they'd packed essentials, transferred money to offshore accounts, and erased what digital presence they could. Where do we go? Eleanor asked, as they prepared to abandon their carefully constructed lives yet again. Lucian looked at her, his wife, his companion, his choice for 140 years. Then he smiled. Everywhere, he said. We stop hiding, stop pretending to be human. We move constantly, never staying long enough to be tracked. We help who we can, hurt who we must, and live like what we are. Immortals who've learned that home isn't a place, it's whoever refuses to let you face eternity alone. Eleanor took his hand. Together then. Forever. They left New York that night and never looked back. Behind them, Father O'Brien found an empty penthouse and digital records that led nowhere. Ahead of them lay the endless world, full of causes to support, people to help, and nights to fill with purpose. Because Eleanor had learned the final lesson of immortality. You could run from hunters, but you couldn't run from yourself. Better to choose your path, walk it boldly, and let the world decide if monsters could also be merciful. Iceland, 2025. Eleanor stood on black volcanic sand, watching the northern lights dance across the Arctic sky. Green and purple fire rippled through the darkness, nature's reminder that beauty existed beyond human understanding. Beside her, Lucian watched in silence, his ancient eyes reflecting the aurora's glow. Do you ever regret it? Eleanor asked. Changing me? Giving me this? Lucian was quiet for a long time. Then, ask me your question again. What? 100 years ago, when I changed you, I said to ask me in a century whether I regretted it. It's been 140 years, Eleanor. Ask me now. Eleanor turned to face him fully. The northern lights crowned him in spectral fire, and she thought, not for the first time, that he was the most beautiful tragedy she'd ever known. Do you regret making me immortal? She asked. No, Lucian said simply. Because you taught me something I'd forgotten in 200 years of existence. What? That immortality isn't about living forever. It's about finding reasons to keep living at all. He cupped her face in his cold hands. Before you, I survived. I existed. I helped people to atone for being a monster. But I never lived, not really. Not until a girl on an auction block reminded me that choosing mercy is the most human thing anyone can do, mortal or otherwise. Eleanor felt blood tears prick her eyes. We're still running, Lucian, still hiding, still hunted. Is this really living? Yes, he said fiercely, because we're running together, making choices together, building something that matters despite the world calling us abominations. He kissed her forehead. You were right that night in Scotland. Love doesn't need a heartbeat. It just needs courage. And you have courage? I have you, Lucian said. Same thing. They stood together on the black beach while the auroras danced overhead, two immortals who'd learned that damnation was lighter when carried by two souls instead of one. The next morning, relatives, since dawn was still hours away in Arctic winter, they received an encrypted message on the secure phone they used for their foundation work. It was from an unexpected source. Father Michael O'Brien. I've spent 3 months investigating you. Every property, every alias, every person you've helped over the last century. I expected to find victims, bodies, evidence of monsters preying on humanity. Instead, I found medical research you've funded that saved thousands, scholarships for orphans, anonymous donations to abuse survivors, a pattern of 2 people who've spent 140 years trying to earn back their humanity. I don't know what to believe anymore, but I know this. My great-great-uncle died bitter and alone, consumed by hate. I don't want that. So I'm making a choice. I'm deleting everything I gathered. No exposure, no hunt, no more. If you're monsters, you're the best kind. The kind that remembers what mercy looks like. M. O'Brien. Eleanor read the message 3 times, hardly believing it. He's letting us go, she whispered. He's choosing to see us as something other than monsters, Lucian corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Yes, because one day perhaps the world will make that choice too. Not tomorrow, maybe not for centuries, but eventually, humanity might learn that monster is what you do, not what you are. Eleanor looked at the phone, then at Lucian, then at the endless Arctic night surrounding them. She thought about the auction house, the workhouse, the girl who'd prayed for death and received immortality instead. She thought about 140 years of running, hiding, helping, loving, and she realized something profound. She would choose it all again. Where do we go next? She asked. Lucian smiled, that rare, genuine expression that made him look almost human again. Everywhere, nowhere, wherever people need help and won't ask where it comes from. We have eternity, Eleanor. Might as well use it for something beautiful. And if more hunters come, then we run, fight, survive, whatever it takes. He pulled her close, because that's what we do. That's what we've always done. We choose each other, choose mercy, choose to believe that 2 damned souls can still leave the world better than they found it. Eleanor kissed him, her cold lips against his, 2 immortals wrapped in each other's arms while the northern lights painted salvation across the Arctic sky. They would leave Iceland tomorrow, perhaps Tokyo, perhaps Cairo, perhaps some small village that needed an anonymous donation to build a school or hospital. They would move through centuries like ghosts, never staying, never aging, never stopping. But they would do it together. And that made eternity not a curse, but a gift. The chance to prove that love could survive even death. That mercy could outlast damnation. That some choices echoed through centuries because they were made with courage instead of fear. Eleanor Ashford had been sold on an auction block 140 years ago for £7. Lucian had paid 50 in gold for her freedom. Now they'd paid for their immortality with endless nights of running, hiding, fighting to prove that monsters could also be merciful. And somewhere in that eternal struggle, they'd found what every damned soul searches for: redemption through choice, purpose through love, and salvation in simply refusing to give up on each other. The northern lights dimmed as false dawn approached. Eleanor and Lucian retreated to their sheltered cave, away from the killing light that would come with sunrise. They lay together in the darkness, two cold bodies finding warmth in proximity, two immortal hearts beating their slow, impossible rhythm. "I love you," Eleanor whispered. "I know," Lucian said. "I've known since the night you chose eternity, since you looked at a vampire and saw someone worth saving, since you taught me that the opposite of death isn't life, it's love." "And what's the opposite of damnation?" Lucian smiled against her hair. "You are, Eleanor. You always have been." Outside, the world turned. Humans woke and lived and died. Seasons changed. Years passed. History marched forward, indifferent to two immortals hiding from the sun. But inside the cave, wrapped in each other's arms, Eleanor and Lucian had already found what the living spend their whole lives searching for: someone who saw their darkness and chose to stay anyway. And that, they'd learned through 140 years of immortality, was the only salvation that mattered. The kind you chose, the kind that chose you back, the kind that whispered, even in damnation, "You are not alone. Subscribe if you believe mercy can resurrect even the damned, and that love is the only immortality worth having."